everyone. Good morning. It's so fun. I feel like we're in like a nice little lounge. We've got some, probably not cocktails yet, but maybe. Thank you all for having us. Excited to be here. I'm Finizio, Haughton. I lead our enterprise and agency partnerships team at Fox Media. I am so proud to be up here with some amazing marketers going. We'll go this way to that way. So first up, Chaucer, the Chief Marketing Officer of United Masters, brilliant mastermind and a good friend. Next up, we have Christine Hasbun. Okay, perfect. I'm glad I asked. Who leads the consumer planning team for Diageo North America. And then lastly, but certainly not least, Christina Choi, another wonderful friend of mine who manages the Tequila and Mezcal portfolio over at Diageo. So we are excited to have some brilliant marketers that prioritize diversity and inclusion in really important ways. I have had the pleasure of working with this crew for quite some time. I'm constantly amazed by the work that they do across diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'd like to give them a big round of applause for everything that they work on every day to make sure that we have representation and equity. So, thank you all. I'd like to start by kicking off with a very simple question, but a question that is going to lead into something that is more tactically important to us as marketers across the various industries that we represent. So the first question I have for the team here is, speaking about diversity, equity, and inclusivity, every company has a statement, right? Every company has a way that they approach it. It is kind of the uniform. This is how we are inclusive. This is how we are diverse in our marketing. And I'd love to hear, and for the audience to hear a little bit about what that means to United Masters and to Diageo. So Christina, do you want to talk?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just start by saying for Diageo, diversity and inclusion is really just part of our DNA, and actually a huge part of why I joined the company 6 years ago. I will just say that it comes down to really the intersection of two things, right? It comes down to the people that we serve, our consumers, our customers, our partners, our own people, our talent, right? And the intersection of the people and our purpose. So our company's purpose, Diageo's purpose, is celebrating life every day, everywhere, right? And when you, cheers, right? Great, one of the most amazing purposes. And I think when you think about that, right, when you think about the people we serve, the people that we serve really represent the diversity, of the world, right, today. And if our mission is to be part of everyone's celebrations, then what we have to do is we have to reach, right? We have to reach all those people who are those diverse audiences. And in order to do that, right, we have to be thinking about the representation and the work that we put out there. We have to be thinking about the commitments that we are making, to our community. And we have to think about how we are building that relevance on an ongoing basis. So really, it's kind of, at the heart of what we do every day because of the people that we serve and how it connects back to our purpose.
That's amazing. And I'm not going to make you repeat, Christine, because you're a real estate company, but I'd love to hear a little bit more. So your role focuses on insights and how you can ultimately understand the consumer in a better, more diverse and inclusive way. And so I'd love for you to share how that impacts the overarching strategy of Diageo.
Yeah, I mean, Christina just said that, one of the things that we have to take into consideration is representation. But in order for you to have a view on how to properly reach and represent a consumer, you actually need to understand them. And at Diageo, and perhaps this is an approach that many marketers take, but we believe that you need to understand the whole person. And that is all about the multiple dimensions of the consumer. So for instance, somebody might be part of the Latin community, like myself, but there's a variety of different ways in which that identity might come to life. They may be Latin Caribbean, they may be bicultural Hispanic, foreign born, why am I describing myself, etc., etc. So, but there are many ways in which you need to tap into consumer identity. That's just one, right? And that can't be the one-dimensional way that you define the whole consumer or the whole human being. There's also the underlying motivations. Why do we want to celebrate? We probably want to celebrate because something really great happened in our lives, in our communities. I actually heard in a panel last week somebody say that they take out a bottle of Johnny Blue whenever their friends lose the job. That's a celebration. So the diversity of the individuals, the diversity of culture, the diversity of experiences and where you are from in your life is also going to translate into a diversity of motivations that make you interact with our category and our brand as a consumer. So that's kind of the approach. I'm not going to say that's the approach. It's definitely the philosophy behind the approach.
Do we all need a Christina in our company? I think so, right?
Good.
They're like, no, we don't have her. Chaucer, like I said, is the CMO over at United Masters, and United Masters has an interesting model, right? You focus on artistry, you focus on licensing, you focus on agency, and so I'd love to hear a little bit about how inclusivity, equity, inclusion, diversity are part of your strategy holistically across those lines.
Sure. So first, a slightly circuitous path to explain the company. The idea is 20 years old. So we started as an agency. The agency is called Translation. The idea there was to help ambitious brands thrive in contemporary culture. So to the point that was just made moments ago, can't drive culture forward if you don't have the people that already make consumer culture and are willing to do so. Ultimately, that turned into a software platform, United Masters. About 8 years ago, we went out and raised a bunch of capital because we recognized that people that were driving culture here are driving it as consumers of culture, they're driving it as authors of culture, as creators of culture. And so when we got into music, we got in to solve a historical problem with music, which was about predation, people stealing rights, and so on and so forth. But the fruit of that has been the ability to take millions of people who are on their way to billions of fans and recognize the patterns that emerge. So you can see adoption data by geography, et cetera, et cetera. This all plugs back in to this idea of cultures. When we talk about culture, talking about the way we organize ourselves as groups, the networks we belong to, some of those networks we're born to. Each one of those networks has corresponding rituals, artifacts, and languages. So we are all the sum total of the number of different networks we belong to. I'm Black, I'm African American. Anybody in here wants to run spades? I can do that because of the Blackness, right? But there are these other networks that I subscribe to, these other networks that I opt into, that are just as real, that are just as important to me, and that can facilitate connections. And so our entire idea has always been the way we organize ourselves as groups deserve to be thought of and lifted up, or at least the rituals, artifacts, and languages deserve to be lifted up, and to the extent that they are, business will succeed.
I love that. So now we all know how United Masters and Diageo think more broadly about diversity and inclusion. I have had the pleasure of hearing some real-life examples from this group of how they've tactically applied those more corporate or sort of consumer-first policies. So Christina, I'd love to kick it off with you to hear about a couple of examples. Christina's like, I'm not sure I'm going to talk about this one, but I really love it. There's the Summer of Mezcal partnership that you worked on, that you worked on for Don Julio. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, along with a couple of secondary recently launched partnerships that you are excited to share.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything that I'm about to speak to, I had to just give all the credit to my Don Julio team and all the amazing, agency partners and internal planning partners, that really have brought this to life, because it really does take also a lot of diversity of thought to bring, these big ideas to life. So, congratulations to the team. But yeah, I'll start with just taking a step back, right? How do we apply, these bigger corporate principles? And I think, what we strive to do is really be very authentic, right? Be very authentic in the type of stories that we tell. Be very authentic in the types of people and partners that we work with to make sure that our organization is really coming across. And also think very much about not just what we say, right? And not just what we put out there, but how do we behave, right? What are we really doing for the communities that we are representing and wanting to champion and support? And I think Don Julio, Tequila Don Julio is a brand that has really exemplified that through a ton of the programming. For anyone who doesn't know, Don Julio is, beautiful, beautiful, very iconic, authentic Mexican tequila brand. And, we designed an entire platform around Por Amor, which means for love, which is really our love letter to Mexico, right? Because we are so proud of where we come from and the incredible, vibrant, and dynamic culture that Mexico represents, and maybe doesn't always get the credibility, right, and the sort of stage. And so when we actually launched Watermore, when we created that campaign, we worked with all Mexican creatives, which was incredible because not only did we produce the most beautiful work that was truly the voice and the representation of what was happening in modern Mexico today, but also we got to share that talent with the world, right? And we were so proud of that. And because this extended group of creators then became our familia, right? This was a huge group of people that have become part of building this brand. And we then continued that relationship with Willie Chabria, who's featured right here, for our DDLM campaign that's actually in market as we speak right now.
DDLM, Dia de los Muertos.
Sorry, not everyone knows that. Yes, I apologize. I should be more inclusive and realizing that not everyone knows that, which is a Mexican holiday that celebrates honoring the dead, right? Those who have passed. And Willie Chabria, we launched Watermore with him a year ago, and he was part of the styling of our campaign. A year later, we came full circle and we collaborated with him on this beautiful DDLM limited time offering for our Don Julio Cristalino, which by the way is delicious. You guys all need to try. And the beauty of this partnership is that we were with him from the beginning. We were part of his journey, and we are so lucky and proud to have been to get to know him, to be with him, but also to create something that we can put on the stage proudly together.
It's really beautiful, and I think that the most amazing thing is the ripple effect that this had throughout the Mexican community, and it's just really, really amazing, so kudos to you. And Christina, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how your role played into these campaigns. How did you start by sourcing some insights about the consumer that you thought might make this most meaningful?
Yeah, this one is close to my heart because it's something that Christina and I collaborated in from the very beginning, but I won't talk about my particular collaboration with the team. I want to speak to how understanding the consumer planning in our organization, which is a group of strategists who operate within the currency of insights, and obviously consumer insights play an enormous role in informing the best way to go to market with your consumers. This can be a campaign. This can be an in-market activation. This can be how you describe your product in your product's product page, right? Every single thing you do as a brand has to be informed by insights, right? So for the example of this particular campaign, we started with understanding who is our core consumer. And as it turns out, and of course, Don Julio is enjoyed by a lot of Hispanic Americans in the US. A lot of them obviously due to the connection with Mexico, who are either Mexican born or of Mexican descent, but a lot of non-Mexican Hispanics as well. And what we started to see was that while the makeup of the consumer was starting to diversify and not be just the Mexican consumer, we had Black African American consumers coming into the brand. We had a lot of white consumers, white Caucasian consumers coming into the brand, a lot of Asian consumers coming into the brand. Well, we realized that this was happening. We needed to ensure that the brand maintained its core and its Mexicanidad, right? Its Mexicanness. So one of the things that we went back to was trying to understand what was at the heart of the guy who put the brand together, right? And truly, this is incredible and wonderful because we can tell the story. What was at the heart of this guy was his absolute, that Don Julio Gonzalez had an absolute devotion to tequila making. And he was the kind of guy, everybody has an auntie or an abuelita that talks to their plants. So he talked to his agaves. And that was one of the most incredible things. He did tequila for the love of making tequila. And that was the beginning of the inspiration of this campaign. Really starting with, that's how you really identify an authentic positioning, right? So really starting with the truth behind it and with what happened in its health. And then Christina did an amazing job explaining how all of a sudden you have the opportunity to take this kind of deep message and make it a celebration of Mexicanidad.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think the beauty of working with someone like Willie, right, who is Mexican, who is very multi-hyphenate and multi-dimensional, his values, his core values, right? He designs for love, right? And so it was not just the demographic affiliation, right? It was also very much the values, right? The shared values that we had that I think made this partnership so real, right? And so authentic, which was, back to my original point.
Truly amazing. You guys are a dream team. Chaucer, we have talked about a couple, 3 specific, really amazing examples, that you worked on in terms of inclusivity, and it's not as much, diversity is obviously represented, but I think the idea of inclusivity and how you worked through United Masters, I'd love for the audience to hear a little bit more about those examples.
Yeah, well, obviously, when you do these kind of things, you prep, right? So that's prep call yesterday. And started to talk about these 3 examples, one of which was AT&T. AT&T made this 5G helmet. We made this helmet specifically for deaf football players. Deaf football players who, fun fact, originated the huddle. The idea of the huddle was invented by deaf players at this one university so that they could communicate their plays privately and nobody could sneak their plays. Now it's obviously been adopted. So they made this helmet, has an AR lens in it, and now, for the first time, because of this connectivity, these players can get their calls from the sideline at the same speed that someone with a radio helmet could. And that opens this whole new world of possibilities for these athletes to even aspire to ever be, for example, in the NFL on either side of the sideline. Great. The other was Beats, You Love Me. It's a simple film execution, but it came at the very right time, and while it won a bunch of awards and whatnot, it really captured the voice of Black youth at a time in the wake of George Floyd, in the wake of all of the panic and anxiety of being stuck in the house or quarantine. Just really captured that moment, and it spoke on an entire generation's behalf. It became the first step in the turnaround story of Beats, the handoff from millennials to Gen Z. And then the third is United Masters, which, though we, it's now a full standing company, it's not a campaign, we're still ideated from the same place. There are some people who are being taken advantage of, who are not being spoken for, who are not being spoken on behalf of, who are not given the toolkit to be able to thrive. We're going to go make that accessible to them. So this motif of underserved or underspoken for communities that you then tool up and provide for is really just the through line of all of our best work. Sometimes that results in a campaign we're all really proud of, sometimes that results in a product we're all really proud of, and sometimes it results in a movement for our independence that, in this case, we were able to get partners like Diageo in at ground floor and help make this something that doesn't just kind of create this momentary spark, but it creates a net new normal for the way that brand marketers and creators and that.
I think you said it yesterday, which is something that stuck with me, the idea of super serving underserved communities. And that's just something that I think all of us here as marketers have the responsibility to do for our brands, and those are some really amazing examples. The next example that is going to be really exciting to highlight here is the partnership between Diageo and United Masters. I know you guys have worked really hard to make this incredible partnership a reality, and I'd love to share a little bit here, share a little bit on what that partnership looks like and how it came about.
I'll take the front end of that. It really started 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago. And we were trying to solve a problem. So here's the situation with the United Masters. Literally 1 million users at the time. And every single one of those 1 million users deserves a shot at some light to see if that song would work. And so we had already, and I worked with the NBA, we had devised a means to use sync, right? Just taking a record and putting it on the James Harden Step Back compilation, or this or that or the other, as a path to discovery for these artists. Meanwhile, over at Diageo, there were amazing music programs that simply kind of ran out of budget just because we were a fiscal year late. And so the original impetus for this idea was, can we solve 2 problems? Number one, these artists deserve an opportunity to work with prestigious brands. And number 2, these brands deserve the dry powder to be able to chase performance where we see it. And so the partnership started as a commitment that we would figure out. And I don't know who's sales or who's what in this room. This never happens. All right, just know this before I even say it.
We like when this happens.
Yeah. It started as a commitment that we would figure out the best use for. That use turned into a broad sync program, which is alive today and expanding today. We've got a 3-year deal on the table today where literally 450 artists are gonna perhaps get their opportunity for the first time to marry up to one of these campaigns or one of these moments and take off as a result. But it also expressed itself as events. We stood up the only fan-focused Grammys party at all. We did that just in the first 2 years. And so when we started to build and pilot these objects, right, whether it be an event series or a new protocol for declaring music and creating opportunity, that invitation to continue to iterate still exists. And so what our baseline partnership is today is really just a platform to figure out what else we can do. But it started, and this is critical to recap, it started as a bet on an underserved community, independent artists.
Yeah, and I'll take the back end of that. I think also what you pointed out was, for me, just partners who had common beliefs, common desires, right? And willing to work together to solve a problem, right? And I still remember, it's like, what is this United Masters thing?
Is this Spotify?
Is this Spotify? Like, what are we supposed to do with that, right? And what brand, how should, and we were like, you know what, it doesn't matter, there's something there. And I think you saw something in us, and we came together, and and I give all the credits, it's not my work, but all the credit to the whiskey team, particularly the Bullet team, who really turbocharged this program and created potential around that, right? And so one thing I will say is, as marketers, as you're thinking about where can I get the new ideas, right? Where can I really figure out, who has the insights to then turn into amazing work that's going to resonate. Sometimes you have to take some risks, right? And sometimes you have to explore partnerships that you don't even know what it could be or what it could look like. And I think that's how it started. And what I will say is that we then, from the sidelines, the Tequila team witnessed the magic, right, that was happening over there. And then we, I also work on a brand called De Leon Tequila. And, we had a real business challenge. And I came to Chaucer and the team and said, this is our business challenge. I think you've got incredible data, incredible insights, understanding the people that we are trying to reach and who we're trying to resonate with. Can we figure this out and work together? And so, it evolved from this relationship through United Masters and into a bigger relationship with translation, right? And now translation is, our agency of record for De Leon. And what I think was magic is just the depth of understanding of the insights that drove the consumer, that connected back to the brand, and the power of when you have a partner, right, who is built with that as part of their DNA. And you really have to work hard sometimes to find that right fit.
I was just going to say, just to put a fine point on this, when our original deal closed, it took us 100 days from that signature to our first activation. And by the 101st day, we were able to take, process, and satisfy brief within 1 day. And that comes from everybody's elbow grease, everybody's invested effort on all sides of this. Our artist base, certainly the people here, some of whom, to Christina's point, started by leaning in when everybody said, what is that? I don't know what that is. They said, well, I'm going to go find out. I'm very proud to watch those individuals rise within the ranks here at Diageo. It's been a signature treat to watch that happen.
It's really amazing. And I think, you all spoke about values, right? And it just is a call to action for all of us as marketers to take a minute and find those partners, have them on your bench, be ready to explore, know who has your shared values, and constantly be thinking about what do those new partners look like, right? Because eventually the bench is empty, and how you find those people that will help your brand succeed and find those values that will ultimately be able to tackle something as important yet as sensitive as diversity and inclusion is really important. So last question, I'm going to turn it to Christine to talk a little bit about future-proofing. We are, I think, in a really important stage when it comes to diversity and inclusion. It is sort of table stakes, as it should be. How do marketers and companies think about future-proofing their organizations using insights and the consumer-first sentiment that you've spoken about?
I think this is very connected to what we were just talking about in terms of bringing in, taking risks when you feel like this might be a risk, bringing in new partners, bringing in new ways of working. That's number one, right? if you do not continue to bring diversity of thought and source into your pool of insights, you're just gonna be recycling, right? So
Okay, write that down.
so really taking the curiosity and letting go of the comfort with what we know is the mindset that we have to operate within in order to future-proof not just our insights, our companies, and by the way, ourselves, right? So that's my, so as the planner, so here's a chart that I will show you. Here's my philosophy, right? And then we'll talk a little bit about what we do here in Diageo in order to ensure that is the case. We have a variety of tools that we use here. We have an incredibly talented team of futurists who put together year over year a future trends report. And what they do is that they dig into a set of 8 key trends. Think about intuitive well-being, for instance, or considered luxury. These key trend spaces that are really pushing a variety of industries, but especially total beverage alcohol, right? And how they are expressing themselves in total beverage alcohol, because that's what we work in. And what we're constantly doing is we're watching these trends that are kind of at the cusp of mainstreaming, right? They are emerging kind of at the cusp of mainstreaming, so that we as an organization can act fast when we see that there is enough of a critical mass for us to operate within, right? So that is essentially number one, is we have a methodology for trend watching and trend finding. The second piece is again, looking for a diversity and multiplicity of partners and perspectives, right? And really thinking about diversity as not just ethnic diversity, that is extremely important. It's not just cultural diversity or gender diversity. Let's also think about, different ways of learning, right? Different ways of thinking, different ways of seeing, and then going to business, different ways of seeing marketing. I have a lot of really good debate with fellow marketers and with partners who have completely different brand building philosophies than I do. But I have to include their perspective into my consideration of how we go about brand building, even though I disagree with them violently. So that is that there's a philosophy of curiosity, leaving the comfort, really establishing tools in your org, big or small, to help you identify those things that are coming so that they don't leave you behind. And then the third thing is having the openness to be able to integrate into your pool of insights more perspectives and diverse perspectives.
That was amazing. I feel proud of all of you. You are amazing marketers. You are even better human beings. Thank you for your time. And I think we might have a minute or two for questions. Is that right?
Or not.
Okay, one question.
What do you do just in general I love alcohol, but my understanding is love alcohol.
Responsibly.
Of course, but frequently, and celebrating daily.
Number one consumer.
But everything I'm reading is showing it's on the decline, there's cannabis, people are sober, is that fake news, is that true, and what do you do if that's just the case?
Can I take that?
Yes.
It's not fake news, right? But you have to look at the nuance, because there are many clickbaity types of news that are being put out there. Goodbye booze, hello cannabis, right? Where you're not really seeing the nuance underneath. So you're having a variety of states. I believe that right now we're at 21 states where cannabis is legalized, right? So it's not the totality of the United States. At the same time, consumers are drinking less in volume, and what's actually driving that decline in volume is beer and wine. The spirits category, within which we participate mostly, is actually doing quite well. And the convenience category, so that's your cocktails in a can and your Smirnoff Ices of the world, also doing quite well, right? So as it happens, we are lucky enough, and our past leaders were intelligent enough to have a portfolio for Diageo particularly that was future-proof. And where I want to go with this is, that was somebody who about 10 years ago was watching the trends, and said, I need to get into this and I will not get into that, right? So there's still an insights story behind it. So, not fake news, people drinking less, but there's a nuance underneath, which is not so much as it relates to core spirits and mixed, pre-mixed drinks, but definitely you see it in beer and wine. And the reality is that spirits continues to pull in a lot of people from beer and wine as well. And the story of cannabis, we don't ignore it. We continue to monitor it. That's one of the key areas that we have in our thank you, in our radar. And once we know more, we'll be able to share more with you guys.
Should we add? No? Okay, yeah, that's amazing. Thank you guys so much for your time. I hope everybody has